Hey, good afternoon, everybody. This is Gabe Hernandez with Comical Opinions. I wanted to talk about this news release from Hollywood Reporter talking about Jamie Foxx coming back into the Spider-Man franchise to reprise his role of Electro, and why I think that's going to be a bigger deal than it may sound. It sounds neat, it sounds cool, but there's some broader implications to it, and I want to talk about that just a little bit. So, real quick, just looking at the Hollywood Reporter article. How's that for shocking news? Yeah, that's definitely shocking news. Jamie Foxx, who played classic Spidey villain Electro in the Andrew Garfield starring Amazing Spider-Man 2. So this was post Tobey Maguire, but pre Tom Holland. So this was that set of movies that came in the in between. Is in final talks to reprise the role for the latest Spider-Man installment starring Tom Holland and being made by Marvel Studios and Sony Pictures. Now that's important there. Marvel Studios and Sony Pictures, they're still under that joint agreement where Sony basically owns the rights, but they're producing with Marvel for some concessions and for some collaboration. John Watts, the filmmaker behind Homecoming and last year's Spider-Man Far From Home, is in the director's chair for the third installment, which Sony has dated for December of next year. Although moviegoers have now come to expect release dates to change amid the coronavirus pandemic, and that's completely natural. Most of the supporting cast from the previous movies include Zendaya, who is playing MJ, a different sort of MJ, Marissa Tomei, who plays Aunt May, Jacob Batalon, who plays his best friend, and whose name escapes me at the moment, and Tony Revolori, who plays Flash Thompson, which is the high school bully, are expected to be on the call sheet when the cameras roll in Atlanta this fall. Kevin Feige and Amy Pascal are producing. Marvel has no comment. Okay, so let's talk a little bit real quick. If you're not familiar with Electro, or this news is new information to you. Electro is a classic Spider-Man villain, one of the very first Spider-Man villains. His name is Maxwell Max Dillon. Originally it was just a 2-bit hood, and then he got zapped in a mechanical sort of scientific accident, so to speak. Electro is a former lineman on an electric company who turned to a life of crime after being struck by lightning while working on a power line and becoming a living electrical capacitor. So what does that mean? That means his body absorbs electricity from the air around him through static electricity, through electrical lines, and any electricity sources around him. He absorbs it in his body, and then he can shoot it out. And he can power equipment, or he can generate bolts of lightning that are very destructive. I'm not sure about the film iteration because it's been a while since I've seen Spider-Man, the Amazing Spider-Man films, but at least in the cartoon and the original book, he can also like slide along electrical currents like on power lines and kind of glide along the lines like he was skiing or surfing or something. It was a little weird, and as you can see, his costume is, shall we say, impractical, and that's the nicest way to put it. So this is Electro. He's basically an electricity villain. Now, for the film, as you can see from the press release here, and also I got a nice close-up here, they vastly redesigned his look to be more sort of science-y, kind of, I would say more practical. It's a superhero film. There's no such thing as practical. The superhero film. But it definitely doesn't have these big, weird, sort of kitschy, tacky lightning bolt things on his face as part of some pullover hoodie costume. So overall, it was an okay film. This was an okay characterization. It did the job. So he's coming back. He's going to be in the next Spider-Man film, which is the Tom Holland Spider-Man, not the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man. Now, let's take a look at why this is a big deal. First things first, if you are involved in the comic book market at all, and you are a speculator, and I'm going to get back to that in a minute, you can see that the prices for the first appearance of Spider-Man, which was in Spider-Man, if I remember correctly, what was it? It was first issue was Amazing Spider-Man number 9. That's correct. You can see the prices of some of the better grade quality issues have really gone up. So for the speculator market, when news like this happens, and Electro, I think, being in the next Spider-Man film was kind of a surprise. I think most people were figuring it was going to be either Kraven the Hunter, because he's a very popular character and it makes total sense for the direction of where the character's going, or because you got a very small glimpse of him, at least in his human form, not that he isn't human, but just, out of costume in the Spider-Man film with Michael Keaton as the Vulture at the end when he's in prison. He passes another prisoner in prison. That prisoner eventually becomes the Scorpion. So I think a lot of people were thinking that's the direction that we're going to go. But obviously they went with Mysterio in the second film. And in the third film, looks like Electro is either going to be in the film as a prominent character, or at the very least he's gonna make an appearance of some sort. It could be just a cameo for all we know. But what that does mean is appearances within the speculator market for comic books, prices are going to go up, and they have shown some significant increases over the last few days. And if I look over here, go to Amazon, and I look for issue number 9, which is Electro's first appearance. I mean, a decent quality condition comic book is selling for $8.95, and if I go back over here, $1,200. So you're basically, if anybody has a good quality version of this issue, the higher the better, obviously. But you can expect to get almost $1,000, if not more, for that book. So that's the one place where it's a big deal. The second place is a big deal, which is a little bit more esoteric. Let's talk about it a little bit. Is this is a character, Jamie Foxx's depiction of Electro happened before Sony got into the arrangement with Marvel Studios, where they began basically sharing Spider-Man, where they could have characters like Tony Stark, Iron Man appearing in Spider-Man films, and they could have Spider-Man appearing in things like Avengers Endgame. That was, so Jamie Foxx appearing in the Spider-Man films, that was pure Sony all the way. But now what they're doing is they're bringing that character forward, and they're having him appear in the film post arrangement between Marvel and Sony. And by doing that, what that's doing is it's opening the door for Electro and other characters that were in the previous Spider-Man films to now appear in the mainline Marvel Studio films. The one example of that to say, okay, is that really the case, or are we just speculating here, is the picture, I kind of already blew it, is J.K. Simmons, who played throughout all the original films with both especially with Tobey Maguire, which were the first Spider-Man films, he played J. Jonah Jameson. And yet, in the very last Spider-Man Far From Home, Spider-Man movie, which is Spider-Man Far From Home, he had a brief cameo at the end, again reprising his role of J. Jonah Jameson. What does that mean? That means they are taking characters from the Sony-only Spider-Man films, and they're bringing them forward into the relationship between Sony and Marvel Studios, opening the door for sharing these characters between the Sony Marvel films, the Sony films of the Marvel licenses that they own, and the Marvel films that are being produced that include, anything from Thor to the Avengers to the Guardians of the Galaxy. Now upcoming we have Black Widow, we've got Captain Marvel films, we've got Doctor Strange sequels, we've got all these things that are coming up. There now is the possibility that these characters could be used there, or there could be some sort of cross-pollination coming up. And why that's interesting also from a Marvel perspective is if you look at the Phase 4 Marvel films and potentially leading into the Phase 5 Marvel films, the future of Marvel films in that particular direction is not really clear at this point. We know they're doing some space galaxy type stuff with Guardians of the Galaxy 3, the Eternals, maybe a little bit with Captain Marvel 2, but that's all sort of like celestial, out in space, galaxy type stuff. But then when you come back to Earth, what do you have? You have Doctor Strange 2, you have Scarlet Witch with WandaVision, you have Ms. Marvel, you have on the Disney Plus side, you have Ms. Marvel, you also have Moon Knight, you have all this stuff going on, which are sort of mystical, dark magic, but also grounded characters. They're not really big celestial, big explosive type characters. They're not big Thor type characters. They're not big Hulk type characters. They're more grounded, ground level characters. And so there's kind of a divide there about the direction of the MCU. Are they going celestial, galactic, very space, very weird with the Eternals, and then very grounded with, say, Moon Knight and Ms. Marvel? So how does that work out? Well, I can't speak to the space side of things with maybe Guardians of the Galaxy 3 or whatever's going on there. But on the grounded side of things, you could do more with maybe a Spider-Man and Moon Knight team up. And maybe you develop sort of a collection of Justice League Dark with adding in Ghost Rider, adding in Moon Knight, adding in Doctor Strange due to Justice League Dark, and maybe they're teaming up against other grounded characters, some of which they borrow from the Spider-Man universe, which is right now mostly licensed out through Sony. It's a bit of a play. It might work, it might not work, but the idea is they're taking the characters that we liked best from the Spider-Man Sony films, and they're bringing them forward into the relationship with Sony and Marvel, and then they're making it accessible, and they're making it a possibility that these characters, I would love to see J. Jonah Jameson take his place with the Daily Bugle in the MCU. And then they do things like have Daredevil, maybe they bring back Charlie Cox from the Netflix series and have him do Daredevil, and there's some interaction there with the Daily Bugle in the MCU. And maybe the same thing with Jessica Jones and Karen Page and all those groups of Netflix type characters with maybe a Heroes for Hire type film as an example, or maybe they do another Disney, or maybe they do a Disney Plus type show or a Hulu show that's Heroes for Hire, or another try at the Defenders, which they did on Netflix but wasn't great. But have that integration where now they have J. Jonah Jameson and he's pounding his fist on television and making a bunch of noise. So the reason I say this is a big deal is, well, it's an interesting take on Electro. It's good to kind of bring these characters back to kind of make it more integrated. But the fact that they are bringing them back within the context of the Sony-Marvel relationship means that they're opening the door that we'll see more of these characters, not only on the Sony side of things, purely in that Spider-Verse, but also the potential for having these characters appear in the MCU proper under Marvel Disney. So that's the theory anyway. It could be right, could be wrong, it could be speculation, but who knows. Anyway, I think just generally speaking, this is good news. Definitely costume-wise, this is what I'm used to because I've read Spider-Man forever, but I understand that this is probably a better, more realistic take on the character, even though realistic doesn't really apply to superhero film, but still, that doesn't make a lot of sense on film. This does. But that's the theory, that's the story, and we'll see how it goes. So anyway, if you thought this video was interesting, please let me know in the comments section down below. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your interaction really is going to help this channel grow, and I do appreciate every bit of interaction that you can provide. If you didn't like this video, or you thought it was dumb, thought it was too boring, or just didn't make any sense, let me know as well. Give me that thumbs down. Interaction helps. Every little bit helps, so I really do appreciate it. And if you haven't already, please head on over to the link down in the description for the Comical Opinions newsletter. I try to put out a more in-depth, sort of interesting thought piece on comics and characters every single week. Sometimes I miss, but I try to get it done every single week. And the latest article this week is about Batman and why he can never kill or get married. And the spoiler on that is if he did either one of those things, and basically he would stop being the Batman. And I explain exactly why that is the case, and maybe you can have a fun argument with your friends about that when I give you the background. So thank you very much for your time. I do appreciate everybody who watches these videos and gives me all the interaction and engagement that you can. This is Gabe Hernandez for Comical Opinions, and you have a great day.